This is you. 2 in the morning, the light from your phone illuminating your anxious face. You have a headache, and after 10 minutes of online searching, you've concluded it's either an operable brain aneurysm or, best case scenario, a rare parasite that eats your eyeballs from the inside. The drama. Now, make a sharp cut in time. Go back. Past your grandparents who thought Vicks VapoRub cured everything, your great-grandparents who saw penicillin as a miracle. Keep going until you land on this guy, your ancestor, lying on a straw bed, sweating bullets. This guy, this is your ancestor. He has no name, no painkillers, and no idea that you, his distant descendant, with access to all the world's medical information, uses that power to convince yourself you have an exotic tropical disease because of a sore throat. But here's the thing. If this guy, or anyone in your lineage, had refused the treatment the village doctor was about to administer, perhaps out of common sense, he might have died. If he accepted it, well, he also might have died, just more creatively. You are not here because ancient medicine was wise. You are here because generation after generation, desperate humans submitted to absurd procedures, and by sheer stubborn luck, just enough of them survived to pass on their genes. That survival, more often than not, wasn't because of the treatment, but in spite of it. The history of medicine is a road paved with good intentions and an absolutely terrifying number of corpses. So, to celebrate the fact that your doctor isn't going to try and cure your migraine with a hammer and a chisel, we are going to rank the worst medical cures history has ever offered. Our scale of pain and suffering today will range from "this clearly didn't help" all the way to the maximum level of "I would have preferred the disease, thanks." Let's get right to it. Bloodletting. For more than 2,000 years, from ancient Greece to the late 19th century, the standard medical response to practically any illness was, let's take some blood out. The flu, bloodletting. Indigestion, bloodletting. Melancholy, absolutely bloodletting. The theory was based on the 4 bodily humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. If you were sick, it was because your humors were out of balance. The obvious solution, of course, was to drain the excess humor, which was almost always believed to be blood. How wonderful. Now, put yourself in your ancestors' shoes. You have a fever, shivering under a blanket. The doctor arrives with an air of immense wisdom and pulls out a lancet. He isn't interested in the cause of your fever. He's interested in opening a vein in your arm and draining an amount of blood that today would be considered a generous donation or a worrying hemorrhage. As you grow paler and weaker, he nods, satisfied, as if he's making great progress. You aren't getting better, you're just getting less blood, which, surprisingly, is not the cure for much of anything. The result? Best case scenario, you became anemic and dehydrated, but survived the original illness. Worst case, the procedure itself killed you from hypovolemic shock or an infection from the dirty blade. This is how George Washington died, drained of nearly 4 liters of blood in less than a day to treat a throat infection. Fantastic.
There was a time, from the 15th century to the early 20th, when syphilis was a devastating plague, a sentence of disfigurement, madness, and death. The search for a cure was desperate, and in this desperation, medicine found an answer. Mercury. Yes, the notoriously toxic heavy liquid metal. The logic was brutally simple. The disease is terrible, so the cure must also be terrible. The motto of the era was, "One night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury." Lovely. Imagine yourself now as an 18th century gentleman with an embarrassing problem. You go to the doctor, who prescribes a treatment that can be rubbed on the skin as an ointment, ingested as a pill, or even inhaled as vapor. What a treat. The problem is that mercury is a potent neurological poison. The treatment would begin to work, but the side effects were a horror show. Your teeth would start to loosen and fall out. You would salivate uncontrollably, producing pints of drool per day. Your kidneys would begin to fail. And most charmingly of all, the mercury poisoning caused severe brain damage, leading to emotional instability, memory loss, and complete psychosis. The patient was placed in a hellish dilemma. Syphilis would kill you slowly, but mercury would kill you often much faster while dismantling you piece by piece. Many of the cured were just people who died of mercury poisoning before the syphilis had a chance to finish the job. It was like trying to put out a house fire with a flamethrower.
If you think a headache is bad today, be thankful you didn't live in the Neolithic age. Trepanation is one of the oldest surgical procedures known to man, and its simplicity is its greatest brutality. It consisted of drilling a hole into the skull of a living person. No anesthesia, no painkillers, just a sharp rock, or later a metal drill, and a lot of willpower, mostly on the patient's part to not die from shock. So why would anyone do this? It's believed it was to release evil spirits that were causing headaches, seizures, or insanity. It was the prehistoric equivalent of, have you tried turning it off and on again? Your ancestor is having epileptic fits. The tribe shaman decides a demon is trapped in your head and needs an exit door. The solution? Make a door. They hold you down as the surgeon begins to scrape, cut, or drill into your cranial bone. The sound, the pain, the absolute terror is unimaginable. What's most shocking is that archaeological evidence shows many people survived this. Skulls have been found with signs of bone healing around the hole. But surviving doesn't mean life was good afterward. You were left with a permanent hole in your head, covered only by skin, vulnerable to infection and injury for the rest of your life. And in all likelihood, the evil spirits didn't leave. They just got a better view.
In the early 20th century, right after the discovery of radioactivity by Marie Curie, the world became obsessed. Radium, a newly discovered element that glowed in the dark and emitted energy, was hailed as a miracle cure for everything. It wasn't seen as dangerous, it was seen as a life-giving force, a power of nature that could be bottled and sold. And they sold it. In everything. There was radium water, radium chocolate, radium face creams, suppositories, and even radium-infused blankets. A true festival of radiation. Let's transport you to the 1920s. You're a wealthy, aging industrialist, feeling a bit low on energy. You hear about a new miracle tonic called Radithor. It's marketed as perpetual sunshine, a cure for more than 150 ailments, including impotence. You start drinking bottles and bottles of this radioactive water. And at first, you feel great. A placebo effect supercharged with ionizing radiation. But then, after a few years of this miracle treatment, things take a turn. Your teeth start to fall out. You develop excruciating pain in your jaw. This is what happened to a man named Eben Byers. The radium was depositing in his bones, behaving like calcium. His jawbone literally began to disintegrate inside his face. Holes appeared in his skull. By the time he died, his body was so radioactive he had to be buried in a lead-lined coffin. He had consumed a dose of radiation that today would be considered catastrophic, all in the name of wellness. The cure didn't just fail to work, it turned him into a walking piece of toxic waste.
In the mid-20th century, psychiatric hospitals were overflowing, and treatments for severe mental illness were often brutal and ineffective. In this desperate environment, a procedure emerged that was hailed as a miracle: the frontal lobotomy. The idea, which won its creator a Nobel Prize, was that cutting the connections in the brain's prefrontal cortex could calm disturbed patients.
But it was an American neurologist, Walter Freeman, who perfected a version that was fast, cheap, and utterly barbaric: the transorbital, or ice pick, lobotomy. Now, imagine it's 1948. Your ancestor is a young woman suffering from what we would now call postpartum depression or severe anxiety. She's difficult. A doctor suggests a simple 10-minute outpatient procedure. There's no operating room. Freeman has her lie down, lifts her eyelid, and inserts a long metal instrument that looks exactly like an ice pick into the corner of her eye socket. He then takes a small mallet and hammers it through the thin bone into her brain. He swishes it back and forth to sever the neural fibers. Then he does the other eye. 10 minutes, just as promised.
The results were catastrophic. While the procedure sometimes reduced agitation, it did so by destroying the patient's personality, intellect, and soul. People were left emotionally blunted, apathetic, and childlike for the rest of their lives. President Kennedy's own sister, Rosemary, was left incapacitated by the procedure. The cure for mental illness was to erase the person who was suffering. It didn't solve the problem. It just made the patient easier to manage. It turned a human being into a ghost. So, the next time you have a cold and complain that the pills taste chalky, or you have to get a needle and it stings for a second, just take a moment. Remember that you exist at the end of a long, brutal history of medical trial and error, mostly error. You are here because your ancestors survived being bled, poisoned, irradiated, and having holes drilled in their heads. They endured butchery that was called medicine, all so you could have the incredible luxury of getting a second opinion. Now, go take your ibuprofen. You're one of the lucky ones.